Imagine a car that was supposed to be canceled. Not once, not twice, but multiple times. A car that engineers said was outdated, that critics called dangerous, and that the company's own board wanted to replace. And yet, 60 years later, that same car is still being built, still winning races, still making grown men stop dead in their tracks on a street corner in Stockholm, Chicago, or London. That car is the Porsche 911, and this is its story. It's 1963. The world is falling in love with the Jaguar E-Type. Ferrari is dominating racetracks, and in Stuttgart, Germany, a quiet, bespectacled young man named Ferdinand Butzi Porsche, grandson of the legendary Ferdinand Porsche, sits down at a drawing table. He's 27 years old. His job? To replace the beloved but aging Porsche 356. What he sketches instead changes automotive history forever. The car he drew had a silhouette unlike anything else on the road. Sloping roofline, round headlights, a fast-back tail that looked like it was always moving, even when parked. And most controversially, the engine, in the back. Hanging behind the rear axle, air-cooled, 6 cylinders arranged in a flat boxer configuration. Every engineer in the room said it would be a handling nightmare. Butzi said it would be iconic. He was right.
The 911 debuted at the Frankfurt Motor Show in September 1963. The crowd didn't erupt. There were no fireworks. People just stopped and stared. That shape, it spoke something to people that didn't need translation. It still doesn't. But here's where the story gets complicated. Because for most of the 1970s, Porsche's own leadership wanted to kill the 911. Sales were struggling, new American safety regulations and emissions laws were strangling performance, and Porsche was developing a new front-engined car called the 928, a grand tourer meant to be more modern, more comfortable, more American. The 928 was supposed to be the future. The 911 was supposed to quietly retire. Except the 911 refused to die. A small group of engineers, true believers, kept pushing it forward. They turbocharged it, they widened the body, they gave it those iconic flared rear arches that looked like the car had been hitting the gym. In 1975, the Porsche 911 Turbo, known in Germany as the Widowmaker, arrived. It made 260 horsepower, which doesn't sound like much today, but in 1975, it would pull your face off. Turbo lag was brutal. The rear end would snap around if you lifted off mid-corner. Drivers either mastered it or they crashed. There was no in-between.
And people loved it for exactly that reason. Because the 911 never babied you. It demanded respect. It made you earn it. Through the 1980s, the 911 became a cultural symbol. It was the car of architects, musicians, racing drivers, and self-made entrepreneurs. If you saw one parked outside a building in London or Los Angeles, you knew something interesting was happening inside. The 911 wasn't just transportation, it was a statement, a shorthand for a certain kind of taste. Meanwhile, on the racetrack, the 911 RSR and Carrera RS variants were tearing apart endurance racing. At Le Mans, in the Targa Florio, at the Nürburgring, the 911's rear-engine layout that was supposed to be its weakness turned out to be its greatest weapon in the rain. Weight over the rear wheels meant traction when others were spinning. Engineers who once criticized the design began to study it. Then came 1989, and what many consider the most important moment in 911 history, the arrival of the Type 964. This was the first major evolution. Coil spring suspension replaced the old torsion bars. Power steering arrived. A new all-wheel drive variant, the Carrera 4, made the 911 accessible to drivers who couldn't wrestle the old tail-happy setups. Critics said Porsche was softening the 911. Purists were furious, but sales exploded. And here's the truth that every enthusiast eventually admits. The 964 was still magnificent. It drove beautifully. It just didn't want to kill you quite as often.
The 993 followed in 1994, and to this day, it is considered by many, especially in the collector community, to be the most beautiful 911 ever made, the last air-cooled 911. The headlights changed, the rear end grew more graceful curves, the interior finally started feeling like a luxury car. When production ended in 1997, the waiting lists were insane. People knew something was ending. A chapter was closing. 1998 brought the 996, the first water-cooled 911, and with it came a controversy that still divides 911 owners at car shows today. Purists hated the new fried egg headlights, which Porsche shared with the cheaper Boxster. They hated the water cooling. They said it had lost its soul. But then something interesting happened. The 996 GT3 arrived, and suddenly nobody was talking about headlights anymore, because when you drove a GT3, nothing else mattered. Porsche proved that the soul of the 911 was never in the air cooling. It was in what happened when you turned the key, pointed it at a corner, and trusted your hands. The 997, arriving in 2004, gave the 911 its proper face back. Classic round headlights, more muscular proportions. It was the car that finally made old school and new school stop arguing. And the 997 GT3 RS, to this day, it sits among the top tier of driver's cars ever made. Full stop.
Today, we're on the 992 generation, the current 911. And here is what's extraordinary. It still looks like that sketch Butzi drew in 1963. The silhouette is unmistakable. The round lights are there. The engine is still in the back, now twin turbocharged, water-cooled, making between 379 and 640 horsepower depending on the variant. There's now a hybrid version. There's a 911 Dakar built for off-road. There's a 911 Sport Classic with a manual gearbox and a ducktail spoiler that makes every serious driver's heart ache with joy. 60 years, and the formula hasn't changed, because the formula was never wrong. Here's what I find most fascinating about the 911. Almost every decision made around it was driven by fear. Fear that it would fail, fear that it was outdated, fear that customers wanted something different. And every single time, the 911 proved those fears wrong.
The car industry is full of legends that burned bright and faded. The De Tomaso Pantera, the Alfa Romeo Montreal, the original Dodge Viper. Great cars, gone. But the 911 just kept evolving. It listened, but it never surrendered its identity. In 60 years of design evolution, the 911's fundamental character, driver-focused, rear-engined, slightly dangerous, completely addictive, has never once been compromised. That, more than any horsepower figure or lap time or auction price, is why the Porsche 911 is the greatest sports car ever built. And here's the thought I'll leave you with. Somewhere right now, in Sweden, in California, in the British countryside, someone is sitting in a garage late at night, turning a wrench on a 911 they bought used, maybe with 200,000 kilometers on the clock. They're not doing it because it makes financial sense. They're doing it because that car means something to them. Because when you drive a 911, you're not just driving a machine. You're driving 60 years of stubbornness, passion, and the unshakable belief that some things should never be compromised. That's GearTales. See you in the next one.